episode 242 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and I'm in Manchester. I forgot I moved.
This is a comedy of errors. It's not even in the notes of Chicago. It says Manchester.
No, old habits die
Chicago,
hard.
UK.
With me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps.
Stanislav, how's Chicago treating you? Is it like Chicago upon Leeds or something?
Stoke-on-Trent, that's a town nearby.
Good to see you, my friend. How's everything going? How's your Sunday treating you?
It was fine. I took my toddler to swimming classes and he hated it. It was difficult and a little embarrassing.
Oh, no. Has he gone before?
Yes.
Did he like it before?
No.
Oh, so he's one of those children, like they're always like, yeah, just throw your baby in the water and they just naturally take to it.
Just hold his head at the surface of the pool.
He'll get gills. They're adaptable.
I feel like that's not how it works, but...
Devin, what do you know? Oh, by the way, also
I know
the
nothing.
Senior Doomwake. It's Devin O'Donnell.
Yeah, I don't know. Why am I senor today? Is that you just had the vibe?
That was the vibe when I was writing the notes earlier.
Okay, all right. Should I talk in a relatively Spanish accent the entire show?
I think that would probably not go over well.
No? Okay. I won't do
Devin,
that then.
242 episodes. We haven't been canceled yet.
Okay. We'll at least get to 243. I can promise you that.
All right. Good deal.
So, you know what? I realized we missed the 2-for-1 episode. You know what I'm saying? Like that was last week. That's like a famous limited resources thing. Like the 2-for-1. I don't know if they still do the for one. I know they did like 2-for-1, I think 3-for-1 and stuff like that. But we missed our opportunity to talk about 2-for-1s.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that my excellent episode with George Jabor wasn't good enough for you. Your pun.
You know, we're gonna talk about some 2-for-1s today.
Sweet. Yeah, exactly. That's for sure. We have a lot of 2-for-1s to talk about, if not 3 or 4 or 5-for-1s.
Jinkies. Before we talk about that, can we take a second to talk about Heavy Play?
If you didn't, I'd be upset.
It's my favorite card gaming accessory brand. It's going to improve your gameplay and your game day. If you haven't checked it out already, you absolutely have to go to heavyplay.com and see for yourself. Their playmats, their deck boxes, their card sleeves are all designed with enhanced ergonomics, mobility, and protection so you can feel good about using your cards in really sweet and state-of-the-art accessories using their unique EquipMag system, which allow you to magnetically attach your dice trays, your bundle decks, and carry your playmat all in one hand.
Yeah, and people have been talking about the sleeves, the curve sleeves in the Discord lately, and I think people are liking them. I think that people had purchased more of like the deck boxes and playmats kind of initially, and I think more people are kind of jumping on the curve sleeve wagon, and I have not heard anything bad yet. And some people seem to like the curvy nature of them. I have not put them through their paces, so I do not have a take here, but I know that there's lots of cool colors, and it's definitely something to grab at least one pack of and check out.
You know what I like to do with my curved sleeves? I'm just going to grab my Palkia V-Star Pokemon deck, which is in my Heavy Play sleeves. When I shuffle them, I like to shuffle them upside down. Rather than putting the curves up against one another, I put the sharp edges against one another, and I find that that's been doing a really good job of protecting my sleeves, my Heavy Play sleeves specifically.
Oh,
isn't the whole point of the sleeves to use the curve, then that's where you shuffle? No?
I don't think that's not the point of the curve. The curve is to make sure that you never have cards upside down.
Okay.
I think that I thought it's kind of a little bit of each.
Yeah, because I thought the curve would help the shuffle a little bit.
It's to protect my delicate hands from the bottom corners of the cards.
That too. Yeah.
But like Stanislav was saying, if you want to grab some of these, you can go to heavyplay.com, use code TheDiveDown2023 for 10% off of your first order there. Stanislav, what are we doing this week?
1 second, let me put away my Pokemon deck.
No, keep it out. Let's play some Pokemon today.
Before I pour some tea on it, before I pour some PG
How
tips.
many energies?
You know, I'm running 10. I'm running 10 blue energy.
I don't know what that means, but I'm going to assume it's a good thing.
If Jerry Thompson were here, he'd say, you need to add some more mana.
Well, that's what I did. I added. Everyone was playing like 8 or 9. I'm like, no. We're playing 10. That's not what today's show's about, though. This week's show It's a classic grab bag episode full of various Magic the Gathering contents. First, we're going to talk about some tournament reports. We're going to talk about some new cards, which are weirdly similar to some old cards. And then we're also going to have beans. Beans for tea.
And more than beans, I think. We've got like some bonus bean content from Senor Doomwake himself.
Beans and other triggers.
I definitely have not eaten any beans this week, so.
It's for the best.
Before all that, though, let's housekeep for a minute. Shout out to the newest patrons to join the Dive Down Nation. We've got Dave M. We've got George J. Actually,
who's that?
You know what? That's too obvious. Let's say G. Jabor.
GJ.
Jojobo.
And we have Stephen P. Thank you for becoming citizens of the nation.
That's right. And I sent out a bunch of international shipments this week. I found a more efficient way to get all my international stuff out, all those customs forms. So a bunch of those went out this week. Who knows how long it takes for stuff to get to like literally the other side of the world. We've got stuff going to New Zealand, Australia. All of our Scandinavian friends should be getting some stuff. I've been trying to keep track of like the most interesting places where we have patrons, and I think that the furthest flung reaches so far I think are what's the area around New Zealand called? I'm never going to remember.
Oceania?
Yes, thank you, Oceania.
Yes.
So if you want to, we've no increased tiers, no new reviews this week. If you want to get into our reviews, you can do so on your Apple podcast. You can also leave comments on, I think, the mobile version of Spotify. I'm not sure on the desktop. I don't know how this stuff works. We can read off your hopefully kind things to say. If you want to be like Dave, George, Steven this week, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can get some swag. You can get some cool deck boxes that we had made maybe a year or so ago at this point. I don't even know.
Wow.
We've got playmats. They've been shipping all over the world. We've got cool tokens. We've got a bunch of new pins and new sticker sheet that Dave made up a few months ago. So get on the Patreon, help support us, and help get yourself some cool stuff. You can also go to the store at thedivedown.com/store, pick up some t-shirts, fanny packs, sweatshirts, beanies, all that good stuff. Mana Traders. We have had some more people on the Mana Traders wagon this month. So if you want to check out manatraders.com, the premier card rental service for Magic the Gathering online, you can get 10% off your first 2 months there with the Dive Down 23. The Dive Down 23 is the code. Barrister and Man, we'll talk about them later, but of course you get 15% off your order there with the Dive Down 23. And our friends over at NRG give you 8% off your order with the code DIVE8.
Shane, the people really need to know, when are we going to get Dive Down merchandise of just cans of beans? Just like a can of beans with the Dive Down logo on it. No? Come on.
Like Andy Warhol style?
Yeah.
What would be nice is if the Beanstalk made bean tokens, because then we could have a new token style, a little bean.
Would that be nice?
Wouldn't it be nice if we had a bean token? Then I'd have an excuse to make another one. Stanislav.
Shane.
Get us into this breakdown, my friend.
All right, so I wanted to kick off with a brief tournament report because, one of the angles to last week's episode was that George and I were both prepping for RCQ weekend. And I played an RCQ, Modern, with Rhinos. And I did all right.
Nice.
But I did not win. Therefore, I lost.
If you ain't first, you're last, buddy.
Basically, yeah. That actually doesn't make any sense, does it?
No, it actually doesn't.
I think that's the point.
I love that film, by the way.
Yeah, it's great.
Literally,
Night's Rules.
It's a good one.
The opening shot of like the Eleanor Roosevelt quote is just like nonstop hilarious. Anywho, guys, I came in 4th place. I made top 8 out of, I think it was 42 players. I finished in 4th, and I technically went undefeated in the Swiss.
Oh yeah, I mean, nothing. What's good about mid-sized tournaments is the winning 3 straight out, and you're just like, well, if I just draw, I'm good.
Yeah, well, I drew round 1 unintentionally, and yeah, and then I had to win Then I had to win 4, and then, which I did. And then I got to draw ID in the finals, in the final.
Drawing round 1 is the worst too, because now you're just in the control bracket all day. You know you're going to play against Beans and all these like Teferi control decks.
In fact, I did play against Beans one time.
What did you draw against round 1?
Tron.
Huh. Interesting.
It was...
Okay, I'm just going to ask now. Is this a game that you should have conceded, like round 2 or something like that, and went to round 3?
Well, I did concede
game 3,
the game I lost, if you know what I mean. Like, I won a game, I lost the game when it was... Like, I concede when it's obvious. I'm not stringing games out. I have better things to do. Certainly the case against 4-color. Like, there was a point when the 4-color opponent had, like, Beans on the board and a Renin 6 and an Omnath, and I'm like, there's no point in me doing this. Yeah.
My man.
They were ephemerating solitudes. I'm just like, I have a better chance of winning if I concede. And that's exactly what happened. But no,
right, I lost. Tell us about your day.
Sure, I'll tell you about my day. I came in 4th place. So basically, I beat Mono Black Coffers, despite Doom telling us that he's very favored against the matchup. I just knew not to bring in Blood Moon, and that was good enough for me. You know what was actually the secret to beating Coffers? Hard casting Lorien Revealed twice in one game and drawing 6 cards.
That seems okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. The games go pretty long, so that does make sense.
Yeah.
And did you see Coffers in their deck? I actually played against Cofferless Coffers recently, because I think people are kind of saying, like, you don't really need Coffers that much, but...
come to think of it, maybe I didn't see Coffers in retrospect. It may have just been like Mono Black...
Karn
and Ring and Shieldreds and stuff.
Yeah.
Typically, when they have Karn, that's kind of a dead giveaway that they do have Coffers, so maybe they just didn't draw it, because I've seen versions of like the Mono Black mid-range deck that Spike was playing, but it's kind of hard to justify Karn if you don't have the mana generation from Coffers.
That's a good point too, though.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But that was cool. I beat Abzan Samwise in 2. That was nice. That was, what I love about these Comparial tournaments is, like, as soon as I get a 2-0, it usually means I have 20 minutes to grab lunch, and that's what I do. Like, I just get the heck out of the LGS, find the nearest like kebab hut, and get a stick of meat.
Perfect.
Yeah. I beat 4-color Money Pile with Beans, thanks to a well-played Blood Moon. So satisfying. When they're not fetching around Blood Moon, it's game 3. They're not fetching, and I'm on the play, so I keep the Blood Moons in. They're not fetching around Blood Moon, and I like played it so beautifully because I didn't jam it on 3. I actually had to slow roll it a little bit, and I played it on 4. And as soon as I cast it, like everyone around us knew I won, but they still
saw the
played
light
out for a couple
drain
turns.
out of their eyes.
Yeah.
You just like
The look on their
tomahawk chopped
face.
it through the table.
Mm-hmm.
Just throw it at them,
Yeah. Well, mine are full art, so I don't want them to tear them apart.
Yeah, you took them out of the screw down card protector.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then finally in round 5, I also 2-0'd against Scam, which was really satisfying because, I went into this tournament worrying about the Scam matchup. I think most people would agree Scam is probably the best deck in the format. It's very scary, of course, and the turn 1 grief play can sometimes feel game winning. And game 1, they turn 1 griefed me, and I still recovered, and I won with 3 life. It was incredible. And I've also heard anecdotally that one of the reasons that Rhinos is still like clinging onto its position in the metagame is because it has a good Scam matchup. And I just felt that in a way that I'd never felt before. Subtlety, Fury, and Flame of Anor were all just like such hot draws.
The most important part about the matchup is you have 8 cards in their deck. Like, they're going to Thoughtseize, grief you, what have you in the first couple of turns. But as long as you just make your land drops, you are like the second you draw a Cascade spell, everything turns around from there. And I think that's why, like you mentioned, Rhino has a decent matchup against Scam.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think helped me in game 1, I was on the play, always a good start, and I was able to Cascade or suspend Rhinos on turn 1. And I think red black X mid-range decks, like whose primary interaction is Thoughtseize effects or burn or point removal for that matter, like turn one cascading, or just like anytime you can really suspend rhinos, like it's always a pretty good play, as opposed to something like Murktide where you never want to do that because then they just see it coming and will always blow you out somehow.
Yeah, that's the thing about that matchup is like that the best cards to have in your opening hand against Scam are exactly that, just like the Footfalls, because it's so hard for them to interact with. And, just like a lot of people seem to think that, with Rhino specifically, you want to mulligan to a Cascade spell. But in that type of matchup, you're much better off just having, like, I'd rather keep, a 6 land hand with the Crashing Footfalls, because if you're on the play and you go suspend Footfalls and they grief you and you just have a bunch of lands in hand, then they're like, okay, well, now I have to cast my Not Dead after all, but I'm not getting anything out of it. And yeah, that's kind of how you have to play that matchup.
Oh, that sounds nice. I actually heard CCR mention something similar on their show. Like, you kind of just want to keep hands with as many lands as possible, and I hadn't heard that ahead of the RC or the RCQ, and I was just trying to keep serviceable hands with as many cards as possible, basically. But I think that's a really good piece of advice. Just land heavy hands are good against Scam, surprisingly, or at least in Rhinos, and maybe in other decks too. All right, top 8. In the quarters, I beat the Mirror, which I always historically struggle against, but I did it.
Good.
Did you win the die roll?
I did.
There you go.
I did. Yeah, round 1 or game 1, I just basically had more cards than they could interact with. Game 2, it was the flip, where like I kept an interaction heavy hand, they kept like 2 or 3 Cascaders, and they just like ran me out of cards effectively. And then game 3 was actually the most interesting one, where we were swapping interaction, and I think I actually just won game 3 in that round because I had double Mystical Dispute, and I was able to juke their Force of Negations, and winning like 1 or 2 counter wars in particular thanks to double Mystical Dispute just kind of like got me there. All right, finally, let's get to the semis where the dream died. It did go to 3 games, but I ultimately lost to Jeskai Breach. What a good deck, and what a tough matchup. They have so many ways, so many angles to like fight you. They've got the combo plan, they've got Constructs, they've got Ragavan, they've got just like Teferi to blow up your plan. It was just like, I didn't feel like I was practiced enough against that deck in particular.
Yeah, seems bad.
And I hadn't played it in a long time. And I had played it before at an NRG and won, and I just kind of had probably this false sense of security. Because you kind of have like a lot of cards that are good against them, main and post board. But for me, I felt like I was sort of like in this position of choice paralysis, where it's like, which sideboard cards are actually going to do the most amount of work? Like, am I playing Endurances, or am I playing Blood Moons, or am I playing something else? I don't know. And what really stung, and I'll be honest, like this was a painful loss, was I ultimately lost to a big Construct. And my opponent beat me by swinging with a Construct and a Ragavan. And when the Ragavan connected, they exiled a Boseiju. And that Boseiju would have gotten me out of that situation. And now I'm just kind of like reliving this nightmare of like, if I could have just gone 1 card deeper that game, it may have been a very different outcome. And I know like sometimes you have to take your medicine, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm happy about it.
The Breach deck is so weird, like you mentioned. It's really hard to attack from one specific angle, because their deck is so good at doing so many different things. They have the Saga game plan, they have turn 1 Ragavans, and then you have to not only be able to keep up with all of that, but then you also have to just stop them from killing you the turn they go for, Breach plus Grinding Station. I think for me, the most important part of that matchup is tempo. So you want to just like, your normal draws, just the Fire Ice into Cascade spell, and then the free interaction I think is probably the best, like Endurance and Force of Vigor, just because you need to be able to apply pressure while still interacting with them.
That's interesting. So you like Endurance, Force of Vigor, and Force Negation against them?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd probably just cut some of... it kind of depends on your flex slots. Like, I'd probably cut the Furies. I think Fury's not that great against them. Maybe can trim on... It really depends. Like, the Subtlety. Subtlety is not very good against them.
Yeah.
So
Subtlety was like the one obvious card to me to cut. This person also played the One Ring. So I brought in my Questing Beasts, because that's just kind of like whenever I see One Ring, I just default to bring in Questing Beast. Again, like, I don't know how correct or not that is. I will say Questing Beast was pretty good over the course of the day, and not only against One Ring decks, though I always brought it in against those, but I brought it in against Scam because, like, when they're furying you and fatal pushing all your creatures, it is nice at a certain point to just have like a hasty big threat that trades with anything and can sometimes even be hard to kill. But sample size was still small. I don't know if Questing Beast is the truth, but it worked the handful of times I was able to cast it.
And therefore it's good. It's use it a couple times, it's good. Then they're good to go. Let's be Roddy.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I do want to talk about Questing Beast a little bit, because one thing you said, I think last week, I think post-tournament when we were talking about things, Stan, or maybe it was during this past week, you're saying that you think it's, and I don't want to argue about this, but you're like, I think this is like sort of good on rate. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's like, like a 3.34 mana value worth of card, you know what I mean? But I think in terms of the flexibility it offers right now, I mean, I guess it's not that flexible. It's just sort of like you said, it's like what? It's an expensive haste creature that also lets them go shields down, or think they're going like shields up rather, when they have the ring. And so just having a little bit of equity there where they sort of have to make you have it. And then if you do, it is what you can have to win. I think sometimes you set to have those cards, right? Where it's like, if I have this, I do win. And so just having it in your 75 is valuable.
Yeah, the way that I kind of look at it is it's really good if you can follow up a Cascade spell with it, because typically the play pattern is they're on the play, they have their turn 3, they do whatever. You play your Shardless Agent, they play their ring, thinking that, okay, well, if you've gotten some chip damage before, they're shocking, and then it's that one turn window. So you just slam this, they take 14, and then even though they're probably not dead that turn, you've dealt them so much damage, and then plus the ring triggers that they're very likely to die from that point. The one thing I will say, my biggest issue with specifically Questing Beast is against Beans, because they have Solitude. So if they tap out for ring, you Questing Beast them, you attack, they Solitude, your Questing Beast, you don't get any damage that turn. That's the one issue.
Yeah, or like late game, They play it with like 4 mana, and then they have like white mana up, and they just can ley line binding it because there are 4 or 5 colors and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stupid instant speed interaction.
Yeah, the free spells.
Yeah, so it's just like the mana inequity can really be there with a 4 mana creature. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like you put a lot of you put one piece of cardboard, but a whole turn of mana into it, and it can be invalidated for free or extremely cheap with one of the more popular decks right now. It didn't seem like you, Stanislav, in the room and in the UK, I don't know about it's a real burn meta out there. Was there a lot of like 4 and 5 color Omnath stuff in the room?
Not that I gathered, no. I didn't notice a lot of double of decks. Like, I think there was like maybe 3 scam artists, if that, at least 2, maybe 3. But it's also the case that like the room thinned out over the course of the day.
Yeah. So kind of an LGS meta, because kind of a lot of different stuff, people playing their decks, some good decks.
There were, you know what there was 2 of? There were 2 stands in the room, and I played against the other stand, and that was my mono black opponent.
The stand mirror.
The stand mirror.
That's right. I want to talk about 2 other cards real quick before handing it over to Devin, because I know Devin has some Rhino thoughts as well. Flame of Anor. Amazing. Amazing card. I always sided in the 3rd, I think. But even if I didn't side in the 3rd, I never sided in any of the 2 that I played main. It's just always good. Like, it always does something. Drawing 2 is like the best failsafe. The fact that it just like deals with any type of hate people might play against you is fantastic. And the fact that it deals 5 to a creature, there's hardly anything in the format that is bigger than that. And I didn't play against Murktide specifically. I didn't play against unusually big Tarmogoyfs. So just like being able to kill Shieldreds or opposing Rhinos or big old Furies with 1/1 counters on them, it just felt like this is the best addition to the deck in a long time. Like I kind of think Flame of Anor is a better addition to the deck than Lorwyn Revealed, even though Lorwyn Revealed is obviously like amazing and I'm always going to play it. I think Flame of Anor does more for different matchups, whereas Lorwyn Revealed is kind of just like this nice glue piece that helps your subtleties and force negations be a little bit more consistent. Discuss.
I mean, also lets you run fewer lands, you know what I mean, which is really important, I think, too, right?
I guess, yeah.
Well, the most important part about it is you're cutting lands for blue cards, which means that
Yes.
you're not losing equity on forces and subtleties. So yeah, that's really the most important part. And if you're playing, 1 or 2 copies of Murktide, it helps fuel those too.
True.
And you get to draw 3 cards a few times, like Stan said he did.
Oh, yeah. The last card I want to bring up, Blood Moon, maybe bad? I don't know. Like, I mentioned that it won me a game, but that was just the one game. There were other times where I had it in hand and I just could not cast it because it was impossible for me to fetch around it. And then it was just like uncastable and felt like it might be a liability right now in Modern.
Yeah, I mean, the Blood Moon for me, because I played a lot of Blood Moon decks and against a lot of Blood Moons, right? Is just like, I think it really is, for me, heavily meta dependent and also potentially like local meta dependent. And that's hard to know. Like if I was going to an NRG right now, I would fully expect it to be like 15% 4 and 5 color Omnath decks. Do you know what I mean? And I'd just be like, yes, I'm having 3 Blood Moons, probably in my 75 at least, right? Just because I know that it's going to have equity. And the type of thing also, but it's, you look at the list of the Modern metagame and it's like, it has, Amulet Titan still in the top 8 to 10 decks, Tron still in the top 8 to 10 decks. There's the Omnath decks. There's, but then it's not good against stuff like Rakdos. It's not good against Footfalls Mirrored, unless, if they don't play around it, it can be. Murktide Regent, no. Hammer Time, okay. It's pretty good against Hammer. What is your thought about Blood Moon against Hammer, Devin?
I think I'd bring it on the play, but not the draw.
Yeah.
Because it is pretty important at not only stopping their sagas, but also ink moths.
Yes.
So I think it's fine on the play, but not on the draw. The one thing about like Blood Moon in particular that like specifically with the Pro Tour, what we kind of saw a lot of the Rhinos decks do is cut it for Charmaw. And I think part of the reason is people expected like the decks that Blood Moon is good against, like Tron, Amulet, stuff like that. They will come prepared with Force of Vigor, Boseiju, what have you. So being able to just have the guaranteed land destruction spell. And the other kind of note is the Tron decks at the Pro Tour specifically, like the Handshake Tron list, they're much better at fighting against Blood Moon, where they have like more ways to cycle, they have talismans, they have, stuff like that. So I think in a general sense, right now, I'd probably rather be on Charma, but it's really close.
Is Charma good against 4-color though?
No, but see, the thing is like, I don't even know that Blood Moon's that good against 4-color, because like, I think a lot of the 4-colorists that I've seen have had, like, not only they have one of each basic, but they also have Celestial Purge. So if they can just fetch the basic planes, they just, fire off the Purge on turn 2 and then move on about their way. So I think that just attacking their mana in a general sense is probably not where I'd want to be. And if I was targeting 4-color specifically, I'd want to just max out on Dispute. I think Dispute's the best card against 4-color.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I sort of walked away thinking like it might be worth cutting the Blood Moons just to play Leyline Binding again and just accepting that like there's something to be said about having access to Ardent Plea for more consistent turn 3 Cascades and maybe even like a postport to Fairy from time to time for the Mirror or Living End, which is a really tough matchup and does still pop up from time to time. So overall, good tournament. I'm pleased with the quality of my play overall. It did sting to lose. Devin, like, you graciously talked about...
I've been there, done that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just like, how do you rebound beyond just like sleeving it back up and running it back? Because it's like the fact that you were able to make 2 finals in a row is impressive in and of itself. And while I have made the top 8 of 3 of the last RCQs that I've played, like I can't help but feel like my luck is going to run out. And I haven't gotten past the semis. I haven't been able to make the finals yet.
It's a really tough question to answer, and I will say, so let's go back to the very first RCQ season. I think this was Dallas 2022 or something, whatever the first RCQ season was.
It was last summer. It was summer of last year was the first one.
Yeah, last summer. And I think I played 13 RCQs during that season. That's where I went like the absolute hardest. And I think I top 8'd 8 of them and not a single win. But I mean, it's like, you have to trust the process, you know, like you did this testing and theorizing, and you came to these conclusions for a reason. And you just kind of have to trust yourself and believe that what you're doing is accurate. And, you know, the other thing to look at is look upon those matches to see if there was anything you could have done differently. You know, I have part of what I do in my off time is like, I'll go back and I'll watch some of my MTGO like VOD reviews or VOD replays. And just like, if I have a match in my head, I'll write it down and be like, I want to watch that later and see if there was anything I could do differently. Obviously different to do in paper. You can't really go back and watch the VOD of paper matches, but that's kind of the thing. It's just like seeing if they're recognizing mistakes is something, but as far as just, you know, dealing with the not winning the tournament, it just, you know, you'll get them next time. That's kind of how I look at it.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, there are some more coming up in the month of October specifically. So, and I won enough store credit that I can just play 2 more RCQs at Harlequin specifically for free. So I might as well just fire those bullets.
I think this is just another good time, you know, to remind yourself that even the very best players don't have the, you know, win rates that would make you super happy. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, I'm winning 60 to 65% of my matches at best, and I live, eat, breathe, sleep Magic. You know, some of the players, some of the best players, it's just their entire career, right? And I think it's like just a good time to be like, look, what can I really expect here? Can I play my best? Can I learn? Can I, you know, go deep in a few tournaments in a row and feel happy about that? And then, you know, then once in a while the weighted coin will flip in your favor more often, and stuff will all come together. I think it's just like you said, it's like just I don't love this visual metaphor because it involves firearms, but you know, fire some bullets, right? And you're only gonna hit the target once in a while with Magic.
Just think about it this way before we continue. Nathan Stoyer, world champion, went 1-4 at the World Championships this weekend. Everybody's human, you know. Even Nathan Stoyer loses games of Magic sometimes. So,
well, maybe he's just not the best player in the world anymore, and someone else is.
Is it you?
Yeah, maybe it's me.
Could be. We don't know.
Devin, I do want to hear what you've been doing with Rhinos, because you mentioned that you've been back on the horn dog train. And you've always been an inspiration to me.
So I will say I haven't been playing as much, but I have been kind of theorizing and thinking about what my list would look like, because I do have this as a consideration for an RCQ next weekend. That's going to be the first one of this season for me. Still deciding between this and Coffers. Not sure which one I'm going to play. But just to kind of, like, I guess we could go over the list here. As far as the flex spots are concerned, we can kind of assume that the core of the deck, at least for in my eyes, for the Teamer version, is the 8 Cascade spells, the 4 Force Negations, I think at this point Lorien is X4 is standard. I think we can call that in the stock, 4 Footfalls, 4 Fire Ice. And personally, I see people trimming on Dead Gone. I still think you want to be on 4 copies. So I think I would include that in the core. So as far as if you want to put that as the core, the rest of my flex spots, so if we just count down, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 11, and then I guess the 22nd land, sometimes people play 22. So those 11 flex spots right now for me, I have a Bone Crusher Giant and a Questing Beast. These are kind of my main deck concessions to the One Ring. And we were talking about Questing Beast earlier, how I wasn't as big of a fan of it against the Solitude decks. And that's kind of where I like Bone Crusher Giant, because very similar, where you go the Cascade spell, they play the ring, And then even if they have Solitude, you just stomp one of your Rhinos, they take 10, or they have to Solitude a Rhino. They're still, even in that exchange, they're still taking 6 damage. They're down to Solitude, and you're getting in some pressure that way. Past that, I only have 3 subtleties. I've seen 4. I think I like 3. It's still good against the 4-color decks because they have Teferi and Omnath, but it is... People tell me that Subtlety is good against Scam, but every time I have Subtlety in my opening hand, and I'm just like, they pitch Grief, I pitch Subtlety, we're both down 2 cards, I still don't feel ahead in that exchange. Do you guys feel the same way?
Yes. I think Subtlety is best when you hard cast it.
Yeah.
More so than the other Evoke Elementals, where like pitching them feels fine. But because Subtlety is just it's a yield sign. It's not really a stop sign. I find that like I don't want to Subtlety their Scam plays. I want to Subtlety their mid game plays more than anything.
For sure. And I think one of the issues with, countering like a Grief opening, right, with a Subtlety is like, one, like you said, Santa's, it's basically, for Scam, it can put them down. Like they might not have another card to pitch to it, and they're not going to necessarily get the they won't have the reanimation type spell, right? But they still have the card. And one of the issues with just mulliganing with this deck is you're like, well, I need to have some kind of, more often than not, I'm going to want to have a Cascader in my opening hand. I'm going to want to have, hopefully, like 2 lands or like a Lorien Revealed and a land at worst, right? So it's just like the density of cards you sort of have to have is sort of taken up, where it's just like, okay, I'm going to have a Subtlety, a card to pitch to it, a Cascader, a couple lands, and like, some other random card that'll show up there. And so, sometimes it just doesn't work out, and you're like, well, like you said, it's like Subtlety's a better sort of late game card, or against real big haymakers, like against Tron or something like that sometimes.
Yeah. And like I think it's worth pointing out that like Subtlety got popular as Lorwyn Revealed got more popular.
Yep.
And I think that like Subtlety in a way makes Lorwyn better too. True. And obviously Subtlety is like, it's good and has been playable before Lorwyn Revealed was printed. I think that the two go hand in hand in such a way that you might as well just play both, and one without the other leaves a little bit to be desired.
Right. Yeah, it was just like, it seemed kind of very immediate, where people prior to the Pro Tour, I remember a lot of the Rhinos list, most of the Subtleties were in the sideboard, and then a lot of the Pro Tour list, like at least the people who, like the Pro Tour teams who tested that played Rhinos, a lot of them had the Subtleties main deck. And it just kind of seemed that there was this immediate shift where that was just stock. And I think part of that had to do with the Pro Tour lists were tuned for a very specific metagame. They expected a lot of Tron. They expected a lot of other maybe big mana decks. And I don't necessarily think that they played Subtlety. Like, if you expected the most popular deck in the room to be Scam, which I guess on average you probably should be, do you want to main deck 3 or 4 Subtleties? Probably not, because I don't think it's not a card that you always want in your opening hand against Scam. Is kind of my theory on it. Past that, just the rest of the flex spots, I have 2 Furies. Another one that a lot before the Pro Tour, a lot of Furies, 3 or 4 was kind of standard, and then after the Pro Tour, it seemed like people just went down to 1. I'm still on 2 because I think it's really good against some specific openings.
It's good against everything.
Yeah, it's like you could go to 3, and the cool part about it is, even if they like Grief Scam you on turn 1 and they leave you with a red card and you rip a Fury, you're totally happy pitching your red card to kill their Grief, because you're both kind of down roughly the same number of cards and you're not dying to their Grief. So I think I like 2 copies, but it's not a card you want to draw a ton of. 1 Murktide. I only have 1 Flame of Anor, which I've been going back and forth on. I think I started with 3. I went down to 2. Now I'm down to 1. Considering going back up to 2, you might be convincing me a little bit, Stan. But the card's really good.
Dude, you should try the 2 and then think about whether you want to play the 3. It's so good. It's always so good.
Did you play the Mutavault too?
I played 2. Well, I played 2 Flame, 2 Mutavault.
Played
and then
2,
I had the 3rd
okay.
Flame in the side. I'm not playing the double Forest.
Gotcha.
Because I don't have a main deck questing beast. The double Forest seems a little unnecessary to me personally.
Yeah, that's kind of a big point of contention is, first of all, the number of flames versus the number of mutavaults. When I think it was Kai that was the person who I saw that did this first with or maybe it was somebody after Kai, but they had 2 mutavaults and I think 3 flames. And I try to list.
I think it was an up and comer called Luis Scott Vargas.
Was it LSV? He posted the channel Fireball article, right? Yeah, okay, that's what it was. And that list had, I think, 2 Mutavault, 1 Cavern. But I was like, I really don't want to be sacrificing Gemstone Caverns for additional copies of Mutavaults. And I had always sworn by 2 Gemstone Caverns main. I know some people like 1 main, 1 board, but I think it's, and in this list I have 1 main, 1 board, and maybe I'll go back on that. But the basic gist of it is you don't want to play a ton of colorless lands because when you're on the play, your caverns don't do anything. And if you ever open a hand on the play that has Cavern Mutavault, you can't keep that. You can't cast your spells that way. So I'm going with the split. 2 Disputes main that I think I see a lot of people still playing 3 or 4. It is good against 4 color, but it's so bad. It's bad enough against Scam that I don't want to main deck a ton of copies.
I like the look of this list.
Yeah, I think we should probably veer off Rhinos. Sure. I do just have one question about one card.
Okay.
Commandeer. When, how, why?
Everywhere. No, I'm just kidding. Not everywhere. But against Tron, it's the nuts. You take their Karn, you win the game. Against... Even in the mirror match, like if you're in the mirror and they go turn 3 Shardless Agent, you're just like, yeah, I'll take that. And then you just go from there. So good against Tron, good against the mirror. Past that, I mean, I do bring it against 4 color because it's good against the ring. That's kind of what it's mainly there for. They play their ring and you're just like, yeah, I'll take that. So Tron, 4 color, mirror, I like it a lot. It's a spicy one of.
Yeah. I definitely want to test with that card as I bought some when they got reprinted in like Commander Masters or whatever, and they were like briefly $1.50, and I was just like, well, let's just get a playset, and that was financially worth it. I don't know if it's actually gameplay equity worth it, but I'll take both. All right, my friends, Stanislav 1. Good work. Keep at it.
Thanks.
I know you're gonna keep going to these events. There's some in Denver, like in a couple of weeks that I'm really trying to get on my schedule. So I'll let you all know what I'm doing. And Devin, I think this is the kind of list that I'm into. I would never play 2 forests, but that's just me. But it makes sense. I see why. But long story short, this is a very long Rhinos intro. So I hope you all like Rhinos, but we do have some other stuff for you that Devin doesn't like. And we'll take a quick
high protein legumes.
Yes, they have funny labels. They come in a variety of dry and canned versions. So stay with us and you'll hear more about your favorite beans. Stanislav.
Shane.
Are we going to talk about Barrister and Man products again this week?
I think that people have heard enough from us.
Oh.
They need some outside perspective.
That's a good point. So I think we're both looking at the same page. I looked at the we are on the same page, both website and mentally. I'm looking at the best sellers. I thought it would be interesting to highlight some of the best sellers at Barrister and Man in terms of overall sense, right? And I'm not surprised by this at all because I'm seeing Seville. I'm seeing Bay Rum. I'm seeing the Grand Chypre. I'm seeing Waves. I'm seeing Muir Wood. All scents that we have used and liked in the past.
But you know what? Maybe the best sellers, maybe you need more of a story. And if you go on Barrister and Man, you can actually see people leaving detailed reviews of their own experience with buying Barrister and Man products.
Did you know that wet shave people are interesting? They are enthusiasts. They like talking about this stuff.
Things like the Howl's Aftershave Splash. 5 stars as recently as September 24th. That's today. Atomic Holiday Aftershave Splash. 5 stars. Like it. Great deal. Nice spicy pineapple citrus scent. Those are not my words. That was someone named Sean wrote 2 days ago.
Oh, thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
I'm looking at some Seville reviews, and I've tried a few barbershop scented soaps, and Barrister and Man is the one I think leaves my face the most moisturized. Awesome stuff. I can't believe how good it is to shave with.
Here's, I think, my actual favorite review.
Yes.
It's for the Cootie Killer Liquid Hand Soap.
Okay.
5 stars, just from a week ago. This hand soap works great and is dispensed just enough at a time, so this bottle should last a good while. Brilliant. I would never have thought of that, but that's a really good point. Like, you don't want hand soap to overdo it or not do it enough. You got to kill those cooties, bruh.
But what's impressive, I think, overall, is that people love this stuff. Like, these are enthusiasts, right? Like, these people buy lots of different shaving soaps frequently, aftershave splashes. Like, everything is like 5 stars, 4.9 stars. You can look at what people are saying and how they like all of this stuff over at Barrister and Man, MANN.com. And when you pick out some stuff to purchase, you can use our coupon code, which is the DiveDown23, for 15% off your first order over at Barrister Man. My friends, we are back, and in something like a we did it for science type episode, at least myself and Stan, because I don't think Devin would stoop so low as to play this. We played some Omnath Beans Control or 5-color Omnath.
Shane, there were no Omnath in my deck.
That's not acceptable. Or just beans, or whatever you want to call it then. So Devin's leaning back, well away from the mic. I see myself reflected in his framed John Avon art.
Yeah.
That's really weird. Don't put anything else on your screen that you want me to see while you're leaning back. So this deck has been on the rise, right? It's really popular. It's the second most played deck in the last month on Goldfish, behind, of course, good old Scam. And if you don't know about this deck, then count yourself lucky. But it really takes 2 primary forms, or 3 if you're nasty, and that's a secret version we'll get to later. So the first is really just like Omnath Ring Control as we knew it, and it just adds Up the Beanstalk. And Up the Beanstalk, if you forget, is a 1 of the green enchantment. When it ETBs, you draw a card. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, you draw a card. Seems innocuous. We've talked about this card before. The general idea is you draw a bunch of cards if it stays on the board. You cast your Solitude, you cast your Furies, your Leyline Bindings. Those are the most usual kind of 5 mana value cards that trigger this. Even when they're cast via Evoke, even when they're cast through mana reduction of Domain, even if they're cast without paying their mana value, which we can talk about later. Additional newer inclusion people seem to be running are like some number of Time Warps, the 3 blue sorcery, take an extra turn. What's funny is, depending on your thoughts here, though, you're like, well, what are you replacing with Beanstalk? You might not replace anything with Beanstalk. You might just add the Beanstalk, because you're just drawing through your deck that much more quickly. And for that reason, some people are even adding additional cards just to not deck themselves. That seems less frequent recently. I see more kind of tailored deck lists, just more down to 75, 78 type cards. So we'll see how people keep developing this. The second type of these Beanstalk decks are the Bring to Light Omnath decks. It uses Bring to Light as a tutor card to cast for 4 or 5 mana. You pull out, you always pay 5 mana, 5 different colors rather. You pull out your Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, you pull out a Supreme Verdict, a Time Warp, an Omnath, a Valki, God of Lies. So, you play the flip side because of the way that interaction works. And so what's cool about this is Bring to Light triggers your Beanstalk. And it also gives you a potential another trigger if you get a 5 mana card with it that you're then casting for free. And so that's pretty good. But these Bring to Light decks are kind of more control. They're eschewing Fury, they're eschewing Lightning Bolt, and they're playing more sort of traditional control decks. They have the counter spells, they have more counter magic in the board that is more efficient. You have that tutor ability of Bring to Light to sweep the board with your Supreme Verdict, and you have another one in the side typically just to make sure that you can clear the board when needed. And so those are kind of the big two that I've seen right now. Stan has a cheeky third secret version that we caught wind of, and we will get to. But what I think is that Beanstalk isn't really. I think is that Beanstalk is not changing the way that 4-color Omnath was playing in any real way. It's just drawing more cards. And you're like, well, that's great. I love drawing more cards. I also enjoy drawing more cards. It's never a bad thing.
I think it does more than just draw more cards. It kind of evens out the 2-for-1ing that you're doing to yourself when you're pitching cards to Solitude.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would summarize that as I am drawing more cards, but I entirely agree, right? Where it's like early, if I play an early Beanstalk and then I need to start interacting with the board like a Solitude, then I'm replacing that Solitude really efficiently, or like the card I'm pitching to Solitude is like, yeah, I'm not quite feeling as down in those exchanges, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Stan, I've just talked for a while. I think why don't you tell me about you refuse to put notes in the show notes, which always drives me up the wall because I'm just like, I have no idea what Stan's going to talk about. I have no way to plan for this. I have to listen intently.
Yeah. I think this might be a dive down first.
What's that?
So yes, Shane, as you said, you actively dislike it, and you very politely made this reasonable request that I include the notes so that you can feel prepared. And I still said no.
Oh, I know.
Just for this particular moment. And that's to say, I played Beans in Cascade in Standard.
Oh no. I'm turning off my audio recording.
We're definitely getting canceled. We're definitely getting canceled.
do get out there and don't play Standard.
I have played Omnath before. I once registered a 4-color Omnath deck for an RCQ last summer, and I played like the weird that version of 4-color Omnath that was making the waves because it was playing the hippo in the sideboard, that hippo companion. Remember that deck that had like Touch the Spirit Realm? Bad times. And I couldn't put myself through that again. I also didn't see anything compelling in Pioneer.
Sure. Did you say you played Cascade in Standard?
Yeah, Shane. I played Cascade in Standard.
Did I miss some Cascade spells?
It's all it's what the kids are doing these days.
Yeah, boy. It's called
Invasion of
Alara.
Is this the double Cascade? The Cascade, Cascade?
No, it's the Cascade and draw a card that you're not cascading into. So Invasion of Alara, it's a Wooburg battle, M-Siege. When an Invasion of Alara enters the battlefield, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile 2 non-land cards with mana value 4 or less. You may cast one of those 2 cards without paying its mana cost. Put one of them into your hand. Then put the other cards exiled this way on the bottom in a random order. So it's got like the Cascade text, effectively. And similar to the Cascade decks that we know and love, the only 2 mana spells you're playing main deck are not Beans. Beans is actually a sideboard card here. But I did sideboard it in several times, so I could figure out like what it was really doing for the deck and just in general. But the only card that you're cascading into here is called Bramble Familiar, which is a new card from Wilds of Eldraine. It's 1 and a green for an elemental raccoon that taps for green and is a 2/2, but it has an adventure, a 7 mana adventure.
Oh.
Mill 7 cards, then put a creature, enchantment, or land from among the milled cards onto the battlefield.
Okay, and so you're not cheating that out. You're actively casting the adventure, right? Or can you cheat it?
You're cheating out the invasion.
Oh.
Yes, you're paying 5 mana for a 7 mana adventure, and then that 7 mana adventure is getting you, ideally, you're getting a card called Cemetery Desecrator, which is 4 black zombie 4/4. When it enters or dies, exile another card from a graveyard, and when you do, choose one, remove X counters from target permanent, where X is the mana value of the exiled card, or target creature gets -X, where X is the mana value of the card. And what you can do there is then you can exile something from a graveyard that has mana value at least 7, remove all the counters off of Invasion of Alara to cheat cast Awaken the Maelstrom, the backside of the Siege, which is target player draws 2 cards. You may put an artifact from your hand onto the battlefield. You can create then create a token that's a copy of a permanent you control. Then you distribute 3 1/1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 creatures you control. Destroy target permanent and opponent controls.
I think we lost Shane.
So yeah, Shane. This is why I didn't put my notes in the doc.
You knew that I would veto this. You knew that I would attempt to hard veto this entire conversation.
I also knew that you were going to be as red as you are now.
How did this deck feel?
Amazing. Amazing. I'm ready to play standard again.
Sweet. That's all that. I mean,
Sign
that's
me up.
good. I mean, it's like I can hear like, some of our weird combo deck fiends in the Discord, like, beginning to salivate as soon as this episode drops. And be like, well, I can do what?
Yeah, it's a real deck. You lose to the aggro decks, but you beat the other mid-range and control decks, which is fine. The mana is abysmal because it's standard and you're playing like a bunch of Triome, so you're really slow. And then sometimes you have an opening hand that could still only produce 2 colors of mana, so you're just like either mulliganing like crazy or accepting that you lose because you have to keep a risky hand that has like a piece of removal. And yeah, you know what? It was fine and fun, and I had a nice time playing standard for the first time in I think 3 years. How are the beans though?
Yes, how are the beans?
Going back, I don't want to spend too much time on standard, but I will say, watching the World Championships this weekend, the format actually doesn't look that bad. I know standard, but it didn't look that bad.
It didn't look that bad. So I played a league. It was my first standard league ever. I've only ever previously played standard like Cockatrice or Arena.
Yep.
But I played a league with this deck, and I free rolled. I got a 3-2. It was great. It was great. I never played the same deck twice. It was A-okay.
3-2 is the only record that anybody ever achieves in any league ever. That's what I've confirmed.
Hey, sometimes you get 2-3. Sometimes you eat the bar. Sometimes the bar eats you.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Here's what playing Beans post-board in this deck made me realize. And this is a little esoteric, and this is the point I want to discuss about Beans specifically. It obviously didn't have the same ramping effect that like a Growth Spiral or Explore does, but there's something about it. The fact that it procs off of these big mana cards and also draws you a card feels like it's a mana ramp deck card, and it creates this new piece of like support and synergy for ramp decks that I don't think we ever knew we would want. And I guess like we have like random cards. I think they're often in red, where it's like when you play, or maybe they're in green too. Maybe they're in Rakdos, or not Rakdos. Red, green, whatever that color
Gruul
combo
Smash.
is. Yeah, Gruul, thank you. You have these cards where it's like when you play a card with like CMC 4 or more, draw a card. But they always cost like 4 mana or more.
Yeah.
They're never worth the payoff.
And that's kind of the issue with these types of cards, like you mentioned, is they're always at the top of the curve, but we've never had one at this spot in the curve.
Yeah. And having this like, it's not a ramp piece, but it's at the point on the curve where you're usually playing like a rampant growth that's just like kind of like fueling your engine. It just felt like, God, this like super powerful card that should probably be in like just about every ramp deck right now.
Sweet.
I loved it. I really liked it.
I mean, playing stuff you like is the most important part of any game. As I like to remind us, besides, I mean, this is Devin's income and lifestyle and daily activity. But for most other people, it is, in fact, a game. So play things you think are fun.
Oh, it's still a game for me.
Good. I mean, if you can make a living at a game, there you go. And talking to your friends online every day, hanging out, could be worse.
You guys are podcasting every day without me?
Yeah. I mean, you get your own neon sign, apparently, if you do well enough for yourself.
We weren't supposed to tell Stan that, so.
Sorry, Stan. Can I talk a little bit about Modern? Is that okay? Or are you good? Do you have anything else to say about this? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I'll just say Standard's back, baby.
Good. I'm glad. So what I did I played. So that wasn't my third version I was referring to. Stan fooled me. I thought that Stan played this Cascade version that we saw a week or so ago. It seems to only have Cascaders for Beanstalk, which seems a little weird. Like you really want Beanstalk that badly? Maybe after playing it this week, I might agree. You do want it pretty badly because it's a really good card. I played McWinsauce's list, and they recently took 2 4-0s in a row in some prelims with this list. I think I saw the exact same, I think it's 75, get a 3-1 in a really close prelim to that as well. And this is a Bring to Light version. I wanted to play it primarily because it's slightly more novel than like the traditional 4-color Omnath deck that just adds Beanstalk. I think people kind of know what that deck is mostly about if they're interested in it at all. So this is the more controlling. It has counter spells. I did have to ask some close personal friends about how to cast counter spell. I think you tap 2 blue lands, and I think the spell has to be on the stack. It's really
Don't ask me.
weird. It's really weird.
I haven't cast that card in a million years, so couldn't tell you.
So, and this deck plays like you think it does. You play Layerly Planeswalkers, like Ren and 6 to Very 3. You interact when you need with Prismatic Ending, Leyline Binding, Solitude, Counterspell. You stabilize and generate card advantage with the One Ring and Omnath. And this one has the little bit of a wrinkle where you tutor cards when needed with Bring to Light, and you take over the long game. Devin leans back. Devin has nothing to say about this. Bring to Light's cool though, Devin. Bring to Light's cool. I think Devin gives me the thumbs down. I think it's a cool addition. I enjoyed Bring to Light quite a bit because this deck of course, I guess, stretches into black mana a little bit. So you're able to cast Bring to Light for 5 colors, and then you're able to pull things like a Singleton Time Warp or a Solitude if you need, or an Elish Norn, or just do like the cheaty Tybalt Cosmic Imposter stuff for big value there. And those cards are doing a lot of different things. Like Elish Norn's really powerful, making your ETB effects double up, or giving you 2 cards off of a Beanstalk, hitting the board, or just exiling 2 cards with Solitude or drawing 2 cards with Omnath. That's all good stuff, right? And even with 4 colors, casting Bring to Light gets you an Omnath if you need a creature to work with, or the Supreme Verdict to clear a board, or like a One Ring to stabilize and get like your engine going. And like I mentioned earlier, because like it's another 5 mana card in your deck, it triggers Beanstalk, even if you're eventually casting a lower mana value card with it. But then like if it is a 5 mana card, you get more triggers off your Beanstalk, which just kind of feels outrageous. So it's just like, yeah, I'm casting a spell, I'm drawing a card, I'm casting something I tutored up from my deck and drawing another card. So that is sweet.
A lot of cards.
Sweet.
Yeah, too many
Beans.
cards, honestly. For me, it was too many cards, and I'll get into that in a second. So these matches go long. Like my first testing with this, I was like, yo, I just played Magic for 85 minutes and I played 2 matches. Like that felt like that's a long time for me.
That's bad rate.
It's
the opposite of a questing
it's
beast.
not good testing rate. That's the real problem, right? Is like for me, like I play Magic probably more than half the time is to make stuff to talk to you all about, right? It's like, hey, we're going to talk about this. I want to get some reps. I want to feel this deck out and then have something to talk to my friends about, and for listeners to hopefully getting something from me, good luck, but getting some kind of valuable information from this podcast about playing Magic. So yeah, it's like, you want to play Magic fairly efficiently so that you get more reps.
We did just tell the listeners at home how to cast Counterspell though, so that is good advice.
You're right. That is valuable gameplay skill to take to your next FNM, my friends. So, but I was able to get a good number of matches in when prepping for this episode altogether. And part of that, honestly, was just enjoying myself when playing this deck. Don't tell Devin, Stan. And I'm just wanting to go back for more games. And because, the deck is good, but I will say it is hard to play, especially for a newbie like me, because I don't play decks like this. I don't play reactive spells. I don't I don't like, I mean, to be entirely frank with you, it's like, I don't like making this many decisions. Because like I think you develop your decision trees and like gameplay patterns with all the different cards in here based on just like reps and skill and understanding what you're doing. And when you come in fresh to something like this, you're just like, dang, I got to figure out a lot of different lines, and I have to figure out what the best thing to get here or to cast here, or how do I actually get to an end game when I have like pretty minimal threats. Because McWinsauce's list is more control oriented. Like I think the standard Omnath 4-color lists are a little bit more proactive or have like more obvious finishers where it's like, yeah, I've got 4 Fury, I've got 4 Solitude, I've got 4 Omnath. Like Fury can close a game if it's left, unblocked, right? Like that's some good damage. And in this list has like the creature suite is 3 Omnath, 1 Elesh Norn, 4 Solitude, right? Like this is not beating down even on an empty board extremely efficiently.
The win condition is in the mana base chain.
And
Can you find it?
Are you talking about the Mistveil Plains?
I am talking about the Mistveil Plains.
Did I miss something here?
Well, okay, so here's the thing, right? I think the idea, at least with McWinsauce's deck, because it's a lot more controlling and control-oriented, is you can imagine, you did say you draw a lot of cards. Well, imagine you draw your entire deck, and then you have a Mistveil Plains in play, and then you can't deck out, which means that your opponent decks out.
Oh my God, what a nightmare. See, like, so what I thought you were going to get at is something I put deep in the notes. I think I was doing notes until like, an hour and a half for this episode. I don't expect you all to have read them deeply. But the thing about Mistveil Plains is that in this deck, this, getting onto like I don't feel like I had a lot of win cons, and my matches went long. And if you're in an attrition matchup and you don't have something as obvious as like the Celestial Colonnade, the new version of it with Hall of the Storm Giants or whatever, right? Where it's just like, yes, I will untap my Hall of the Storm Giant and I will hit you with it. That seems pretty good. In fact, I think if you are new at this deck, I would suggest putting a Hall of the Storm Giant in here if you can. Maybe over the Mistveil Plains, but Devin's line, I think, does have value if you're extremely fast. But what Mistveil Plains actually, I think, does, which is a plains that allows you to pay white and tap it and put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library if you control 2 white permanents, right? That's what Mistveil Plains is all about. So at the end game, right, like you ostensibly will have a Leyline Binding and an Omnath, or like a Solitude and a Leyline Binding, or 2 Leyline Bindings, whatever. You have 2 white permanents. You can then recycle another one of your threats that was killed earlier into your deck, and then you can do things like tutor it up with Brain Delight if you have a Brain Delight in your hand, right? So it's like, hey, I'm able to get a sort of a recyclable Omnath or a recyclable Solitude and then actually kill my opponent, hopefully, right? And you back that up with like, the 3 counter spells you have remaining, or like the Leyline Binding that you still have in hand because you've drawn most of your deck. But like, I definitely did not think about that. Like I was too busy looking at everything on the board and just being like, okay, well, I got to remember to tap. Do I tap my One Ring here? Do I, make sure I tick up my Renin 6, make sure I tick up my Teferi 3. Okay, I gotta, and then I'm just like, I'm exhausting everything. And I'm like, well, how do I actually kill my opponent? This sucks. And I really wish I had a creature land. And yeah, I could have probably just recycled the Omnath that they furied out of the game earlier. Do you know what I mean?
Another important one to recycle too is Valky, because when you cast Tibalt, not only does your opponent have to, well, it goes to very high loyalty, but they have to spend a lot of resources killing it. You also only have 1 copy. So if you're able to Mistveil Plains that back in and then slam into the Bring to Light and just replay another Tibalt, it's once they've exhausted that many resources to kill the first one, it's nearly impossible to kill the second one.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, where it's like, yeah, I might be out of resources, or I might not have any big haymakers left, but Valky will reveal yours to me potentially too. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I think that is a huge angle of this particular deck in certain matchups, where it's just like, this is a grinder, like this is a real attrition based matchup, and you're gonna have to play it like that sometimes, and that just sort of gets into a lot of the challenges of this deck, which for me was there's just so many decision points, right? It just takes a long time to learn. And these are the same. Some of these are like the same as always, right? Where it's like, what do I need to solitude? Can I wait until I can hard cast it? Do I, counter the spell or wait for something more important?
Shane, when did you stop liking decision heavy decks?
Well, I mean, there's certain types of decision heavy decks that I think are good. Like, we talk a lot about Rhinos. We talked about Rhinos for a half hour in this show yet again because we love it so much. And I think Rhinos has like the right amount of decisions for me. And I think typically they are frequently obvious, but also
linear decisions,
but also frequently like interesting enough that I feel I can be smart.
Yes.
And in terms of the things that I get out of Magic, especially paper competition Magic, is not to always play a deck that makes me feel smart enough, but ultimately something like I just sort of find fun, I understand, and I enjoy sitting across the table from my opponent playing this deck, right? And I think that's one reason that we have latched on to Rhinos so much is that I think it is a very happy medium deck in that sense, right? Where it's like proactive and reactive. It's thinky, but not too thinky, where I'm feeling exhausted at the end of every match, right? And I can usually get the game done in time to go have a break.
And another nice thing about Rhinos is it's very sequencing. Like sequencing matters a lot, where you have to decide, what not only like what land do I fetch and when do I cycle this Lorien, but even just do I cycle this Lorien? Do I have enough land drops? Is the game going to go that long? Do I ice on turn 2? Do I save it for their end step? Do I have? There's a lot of those small micro decisions that just add up, and it is pretty satisfying.
But with this, I mean, I know it sounds like I'm saying like I want to cast Lava Spike and turn my Goblin Guide sideways, but it's I think it's with the problem with this is that they just add up so much, and the consequences of misplays can be really severe later. When when I bring Delight adds a bunch of those too, where it's like because you're casting a super valuable tutor, it's like, well, what do you get with that? Like, is Tybalt the best here? Is like another Omnath that like one got killed earlier, and I can play a fetch land and then maybe play more cards from hand because of the mana advantage. Like, and then like you have more decisions where it's like, what do I do with all these cards I'm drawing? Like, do I need more cards? Like, well, it's like, if you have the mana, yeah, sure. But it's like, do I even need more cards here? Do I want to draw cards here? Like, and then what am I going to discard? Because you're going to be discarding the hand size more often than you think you're going to, at least if you're me. And, when do I deploy these valuable threats I have? Like, I definitely, put an Omnath out there on turn 4, thinking like, okay, next turn, like I'll be able to even do something more with this Omnath, and then it like eats a Fury, or it eats like a Unholy Heat or something like that. And you're like, well, I know I replaced my Omnath with another card, but I don't have a lot of stuff to kill my opponents. Like, I really need to be able to protect my Omnath and stuff like that. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that you have to think about besides, and I think for me, that came into play where it's like, I am not used to playing a deck where I need to protect my threats quite as much as this. Like, and so being able to protect them was more important than I think it was, where it's like, you need to back this up with a counterspell, my friend, or something like that. Or be thinking about when am I going to be able to get another one or have something in reserve or something like that. But anyway, I think this deck feels really good, besides the fact that it takes a long time to do it and you have to really be analytical about your play. Like, you're going to go to time with this deck. You may deck yourself, depending on the matchup. You just have like a lot of ways to dig into your deck, and you're going to be drawing a lot of cards. And I think this deck's really intriguing, and I honestly kind of want to keep learning to play it, but like the investment is so much, and it's so not my style. And like, that's kind of one reason I think I want to like keep playing a little bit, where it's just like, hey, stop making it not your style and at least have some appreciation for like what it's doing. And it also, I think, will help me learn where like the tension points are. Like, if my opponent's doing this, what does it potentially indicate about their hand? Does it indicate like, are they kind of desperate to stop the bleeding? Like, are they solituding something that isn't particularly super lethal right now, but they're like, man, I can't take any more damage from like this 2-power creature or something like that, and they just have to suck it up rather than play it on 5 mana. Like, what does it say about the mana they have in hand? Blah, 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 right? So I think it's just like good to play decks that you don't necessarily think you want to make your new main deck, right?
Yeah, and in situations like that, you can kind of see like if they're like you said, casting a Solitude, that they pitch casting early, that they maybe want to save till turn 5. It's like, do they have a ring in hand? Do they want to preserve their life total to make sure that they can get the most amount of value out of this ring, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm kind of with you. I'm not a huge fan of playing decks like this myself, but it is good to kind of to play the deck yourself, to kind of understand the pressure points, the weak points, and kind of what the general curve looks like. And maybe that can help you, even if you're not going to play it yourself, that can help you when you're playing a different deck because you know what to look out for.
For sure. Yeah. I think the deck is good. I think it feels good against a lot of stuff. Like, you really can come back.
Like what?
I think it felt really surprisingly good against coffers. Well, non-coffers. Coffers, like, I was able to win that matchup, I think, fairly surprisingly easy. I think anything that's like going to go mid to long, you have a lot of play against. Like, aggro can be tough because you really have to ensure that you get to your early interaction to stop the initial stuff. And then if you can stabilize, especially with an Omnath, of course, we know how much it sucks to go up against an Omnath with an aggressive deck and they're having lands in hand. So I'm not going to speak, of course, any intelligently to like deep matchup kind of spread or anything like that. But I think unless someone is like really trying to mow me down, I'm feeling pretty decent to have a shot. I played against like a couple like pretty land destruction style attrition decks that was not fun because I didn't play quickly enough, and those can really be grindy because they don't usually have extremely powerful creatures and they're attacking your mana, and so it's just like not a great way to keep developing in the way you want. But anyway, I think it's like, I'm more honestly annoyed that, and I think you all are too, that this is something we have to think more about now and be worried about playing against more, is that Omnath is still back, is still sticking around, because I don't love playing against decks like this.
You and me both.
Yeah, no, I just pretend it doesn't exist and I'm never going to face it, and that's been okay.
That's a good way to go about it.
All right. So there's our beans content. And I know, Devin, you actually wrote up, I think we have a little bit of time, you wrote some more explorations into Prowess.
Prowess. Yes, sir.
In what format?
Modern.
Okay.
Come on. So yeah, played a little bit of Prowess this week. I wanted to try a couple different variations because as I mentioned, I do have an RCQ coming up. I am, considering Prowess as one of the decks. I think it's ultimately probably behind Rhinos and Coffers, but I wanted to give out specifically a shot at this new Gruul Prowess list that I initially saw from the top 8 of, I think it was last week's challenge or one of the challenges from last week. And it has your typical Prowess fare, your, Swiss Spears, Soulscar Mages, Channelers, Lightning Dart. I was going to say Lightning Dart. Lightning Bolt, Lava Dart, Manamorphose. And we're touching, instead of blue, we're touching a little bit of green here for a new card, Questing Druid, which, is a card that I think a lot of people had their eye on during spoiler season. And it's even a card that has gone all the way into Legacy, believe it or not. I've seen some Teamer Delver decks in Legacy playing Questing Druid. So yeah, it's all over the place. But what it's doing here is it's trying to make its best Ren's Resolve Reckless Impulse impression. So the idea is you're playing a lot of free spells, like you have Manamorphose, which is technically free, Mutagenic Growth, Mishra's Bauble, things like that. And then you hit a couple of those off of the Questing Druid. You can cast those. But the more that I played with this card, it's kind of weird. This is not your typical Ren's Resolve or Reckless Impulse. So the first time that I ever played this card was in Pioneer in the Pia decks, which is like the Boros Pia decks that played 4 copies of Showdown of the Scalds. And I quickly realized that, my initial reaction was, oh, it's just a better version of Reckless Impulse, right? You just, cut 4 for 4, call it a day. But it's not that, because the timing restriction means you only get them until the end of the turn that you cast it, right? Until your next end step. Whereas Reckless Resolve says until the end of your next turn. So if you're casting this main phase and you hit a card that you don't have mana for, it's gone. You can't cast it next turn, compared to Reckless Impulse, where you can actually do so.
But this is an instant. So you could play this on your opponent's end step, and then you have a turn to use it, to use whatever you exile.
It is. But the awkward part about that is when you're playing a Prowess deck, you don't typically want to be casting spells on your opponent's turn, because when you have a bunch of Prowess creatures in play, if you have a Soul Scar and a Swiss Spear, you don't want to use and kind of waste the Prowess trigger that you're casting the Seek the Beast on their turn, because then you're missing a lot of damage on your turn. So that's kind of where it gets a little weird in terms of sequencing. What I kind of found myself doing a lot was just casting the creature half. So the creature half, it's not that bad. It's a 2-mana 1/1, which is, sketchy against Bowmaster, but it has the Quirion Dryad text, which is whenever you cast a non-green spell, you get a counter on it. So it triggers off of Lava Dart, Lightning Bolt, Metamorphose, all that kind of stuff. So at least the way that I kind of look at this card, and the way that I think a lot of people should be viewing it, is if it's in your opening hand and you need, like, if you have, a Monastery Swiss Spear and you just need like an additional creature, better to just play it as the creature half instead of holding it up. Because if you, like, let's say you hold it up and you go, Seek the Beast on their turn, you're kind of missing that whole turn of pressure, and you want to, as a Prowess deck, you want to continuously applying that pressure. So that was just kind of my small note about that. And, the more free spells that you play, the better it gets. So maybe there is a version that, like, maybe you're supposed to play Gutshot in addition to Mutagenic and Bauble, so that you have this higher density of free spells that you can hit off of it and not be worried about casting it on turn 2 and missing out that value. So that was kind of my thoughts on that card. Just kind of a general note here. We talked about that, whereas you're just casting the creature half of it, I think that definitely comes up. Past Questing Druid, the other green card here, the reason that we're playing green in this Prowess deck, is Abundant Harvest, which is kind of a cool card. It's very subtle, but very similar to, like, Lorien Revealed in Rhinos, where you're cutting lands for these land cyclers. Because at the end of the day, Abundant Harvest, if you need a land drop, it's a very similar card where you're spending 1 mana, you name land, you're getting that land back. So it's very similar, but what it's doing is it's also giving you a Prowess trigger, right? So if you have a couple of Prowess creatures, and say you have an Abundant Harvest instead of a land, even if you have to hit that land drop, which you would be doing anyways if you're cutting Abundant Harvest for a land, you're getting that additional Prowess trigger, which is very important. And then, later in the game, if you need to hit spells, if you have 3 mana in play, you can cast it, hit a 2 mana spell, still be able to cast that, so on and so forth. So a very subtle thing, but it is, another reason to be playing green as opposed to blue. Now, granted, I don't think any of this is better than Expressive Iteration. Well, I'll say that up front. I think the blue-red Prowess decks probably still have my pick for Prowess deck of choice, but it was interesting to kind of explore this out. And then Underworld Breach, card's broken, especially in this deck where it's so absurd, because if you ever get to a spot where you have, like, say you have multiple Dragon's Rage channelers in play, and you can go, like, play Underworld Breach, mill 2 cards, bauble from the graveyard, trigger the 2 channelers, mill 2 cards. You just, like, go through your entire deck and get, 7 or 8 or 9, 10 plus Prowess triggers in that one big turn. But even though it's the best card in the deck, wouldn't play more than 2, because you don't really want it in your opening hand. It can be kind of awkward there. So that is pretty much it for the Gruul Prowess deck. The second one, Stan's got something.
Look, you're playing Gruul. Mm-hmm. I have a favor to ask.
Okay.
I need you to... There's a card I need you to make good.
Oh,
because
no.
I've invested a lot of money into it.
Okay.
And it's called Thrasta Tempest Roar. Okay. I got 8 copies, full art, MH2 Mythic.
Stan's just got his binder out here. The binder cam. I can't make any promises.
If not now, then when?
I could do my best, though. Well, didn't we just talk about why we didn't like Gruul instead of Izzet, and now you're trying to get me to play a Gruul card? What's the deal here?
Here you are. I don't know. As long as you have the deck rented.
But the other Prowess deck, not featuring Thrasta Tempest Roar, unfortunately for Stan, is Jeskai Prowess. This is kind of the more I guess, traditional stock-ish version of Prowess. This is the one that I was definitely thinking of playing in the RCQ, which I got the list from local friend Bailey, aka BCS8995 on Twitter, X, whatever calling it these days. And they actually top forward one of the local RCQs that I didn't go to. And local because they drove 2.5 hours and I didn't want to drive that far.
This looks very much like Prowess to me, Devin. Is there anything novel here?
Oh yeah, it's Prowess.
Okay. So there's no new tech here. This is Prowess.
No, the only new tech is the Fable of the Mirror Breakers in the sideboard. I don't think that's very stock.
Okay. Just for the grindy matchups, as they say.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think importantly, it's really, really good against scams specifically because it's one of the few cards that in the Prowess sideboard that can give you, like outside of Expressive and things like that gives you that clean 2-for-1. And that's why I think it's really, really important against scam.
Well, a new-ish card is preordained technically. And, obviously Prowess has had plenty of cantrips to choose from over the years, instant and sorcery speed. Does the quality of preordained in and of itself make Prowess better? Or is it just the consistency of like drawing better cards, setting up better plays? I mean, I guess I maybe just answered my own question.
So it's very, very funny you asked that because I have a little write-up thing here as far as preordained is concerned. I think this might be the best preordained deck that we've seen so far since preordained was unbanned. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. So Prowess decks in the past have had kind of issues where you just kind of draw the wrong half of your deck in the early game and you didn't have
like
a card like that
yes.
to kind of Thanks. You kind of didn't have the ability to smooth out your draws before. You would draw too many creatures or too many spells, and preordained kind of it's mana efficient. It's as mana efficient as it can get. It costs 1 mana. You can't get more mana efficient than that. And it's the card in terms of mana efficiency versus how many cards that you look at to help fix those draws. It is undeniably the best one in the format for 1 mana. So it gives you the ability to fix those draws early on while still being a very good top deck late, because not only is it triggering your Prowess creatures, but you're also digging 3 cards to help find that Expressive or that Underworld Breach to kind of close out the game. So I do think this is probably the best preordained deck that we've seen out of all of the ones that have included it. And that's kind of part of the reason why I think this deck is very, very good. The one thing that I also did want to touch on here, you'll notice a lot of people had talked about Elusive Otter. Right, as far as 1 mana blue Prowess creature, they would just slot right into the blue-red Prowess deck. They want more 1-drops, and yes, I agree. It would be nice to have another copy of Soulscar or Swiftspear. The problem with Elusive Otter, especially when you're comparing it to something like a Sprite Dragon, is the pump. As far as Elusive Otter versus Dragon is concerned, the pump's not permanent, right? And when you're playing in a world of all these Orcish Bowmasters, when they Bowmaster your Otter, you have to have a spell to protect it that turn, but then if they have a follow-up Bowmaster, or more likely a Not Dead After All on the Bowmaster that you're killing, you need another spell to be able to save it, so on and so forth. So it's just kind of awkward where like you need to constantly have spells up, and whereas with Sprite Dragon, once you get that first counter, regardless of what they do with their Bowmasters the rest of the game, they can only deal that 1 damage to it because you got that permanent pump. So I think even though it's 2 mana versus 1, I do still think that I like Sprite Dragon a little bit more. And then just last very small note here, the white sideboard card. So this is it Prowess, but we are splashing white on the sideboard for Path to Exile and Prismatic Ending. Very, very important because your deck is kind of weak to cards like Sanctifier and Vec and Chalice of the Void. So I think I like those to be able to answer those.
Sweet.
That's all I got.
Man, we talked about a lot of decks today. Holy moly.
Yeah. And we didn't even need Dave to talk about Prowess.
No.
At us.
Is Dave going to be mad that I talked about Prowess without him?
I think he's going to be sad that he doesn't get to talk to you about it, to be honest.
Sure. I mean, that's his fault for not being here this weekend.
That's right. For getting Skyline instead of recording the show.
Oh, yeah. He's in Cleveland this weekend. I don't want to... I guess I can't dox him. He'll be home by then.
Yeah. So, I think we're running low on time.
Yeah, let's get out of here.
Do we need to mention a new card, or should we save it for next week?
Let's just save it. we've had some long episodes lately, listeners. So we'll keep this one a whole maybe 10 minutes shorter than our ones have been.
How about let's just tease the next episode. Cavern of Souls. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways.
No, I mean it's a good card for decks that want to run it.
Mm-hmm.
My counter spells won't work anymore though.
Yeah, I'm a thumb sideways on Cavern.
I don't have too many
and
thoughts.
Pioneer and beyond.
Well, it depends on how much time we get. Basically, the counterspells and Pioneer suck. I don't think Cavern's going to change that much. Like, the counterspells are already bad, and you're giving people less reasons to play the bad counterspells. It's like, it's not going to impact that much, I think.
Devin, mastering the art of the tease with a short rant.
Yeah, we can go deeper next week. But
all right, yeah, more on that next week. Our first episode of October. Wow. Okay.
Spooky month.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Great episode. I had fun. I'm glad I got to play Standard again. But that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. If you'd like to submit a question or just reach out in general, you can tweet us. We're still on Twitter for now. Maybe by the time you tweet us, we won't be, but for now we're on Twitter. You can reach us at @thedivedown, all one word, or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown and check out our store at thedivedown.com/store. Head over to heavyplay.com to get some incredible deck and dice boxes and playmats featuring the Equip Mag system. Use promo code THEDIVEDOWN2023 for 10% off your first order from heavyplay.com. Or just head over to thedivedown.com and click on our affiliate link, and that'll do all the work for you in getting that sweet heavy play discount. Also, shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring the Dive Down. Sign up for Mana Traders using the promo code THEDIVEDOWN23, all one word, for 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. And also get some amazing shaving soaps, body soaps, fragrances, and more at Barrister and Mann using the promo code THEDIVEDOWN23 for 15% off your first order at Barrister and Mann. And look, it's RCQ season. Buy some paper cards and save some money while you do that over at Nerd Rage Gaming. Promo code DIVE8 gets you 8% off your order at NRG. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Space Blood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and beans, the musical fruit. The more you eat, the more you toot.
Hello and welcome to episode 242 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest. Hold on, Stan's here.
I was going to jump in the next paragraph. I thought that was the bit.